Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, it's Friday and looking forward to a beautiful weekend. Well, it's 16 degrees and sunny right here in Brisbane. Beautiful day, I should say. Just a little bit of smoke or haze around. But apart from that, it is again an absolutely fantastic day right here in Brisbane, and hoping that we're all looking forward to a very, very eventful weekend. Yes, there are lots of functions and events taking place. We will talk about all of those towards the end of the show. Right now, let's get this on the road with the top news for today. Disability job providers have been put on notice.
Like his car that's been modified, Stefan Notto's workplace only needed a few small adjustments to ensure he could do his job.
Both bosses are very on having a clean site. So that makes it a lot easier for me to access the sites.
Stefan lives with cerebral palsy. To find a job, he approached a disability employment service. But he found its advice wasn't tailored to his own career aspirations.
We may not all fit that mould. I'm in a way unique in what I want to achieve.
Organisations that provide employment services to people with disability are government funded. With the unemployment rate for people with disability barely shifting in decades, today the government announced those providers will have to show they're delivering results.
Putting the participant at the centre is critical to getting good long-term outcomes.
Under the new guidelines, employment providers will be monitored by independent observers. Clients will be asked for their feedback, and that information will be published starting early next year. It's hoped that will keep providers accountable.
People with disability should be able to count on programs that are serviced by them, about them.
How you going?
Stefan now works with a construction company that builds homes for people living with disability.
I can actually pick up things where, hang on, if we're doing that for this person that has to live here, it's going to affect them in this and this way.
He's thriving and wants the same for others. Naz Campanella, ABC News.
And I think going by that report, we know that there are many agencies which are government funded, but they're not probably providing the full service. They may be doing a few little things, but not as per this report. So there's a lot more that needs to be done. And the scrutiny of the services provided is always welcomed. Right now, grape growers, that's a bit of a tongue twister this morning, isn't it? Grape growers consider options amid a lot of confusion.
Did you know there's a wine glut at the moment? Well, producers in the country's largest grape growing region are considering their options as they deal with an oversupply of red wine. They could direct some our way. Charles Bryce is following developments for us from Adelaide. Charles, good morning. It's not the Barossa, Clare or McLaren Vale that are the largest grape growing region. You're talking about the Riverland here.
Yeah, it's the largest in Australia. It does contribute about 32% of the Australian wine grape crush annually, and it is worth about $400 million to the wine industry here in Australia. But it's due to an oversupply of red wine right around the world that some farmers are having to diversify their crops or walk away from the industry altogether. The latest vintage has been a particularly tough year. In fact, it's been one of the hardest years since the millennial drought in the early 2000s. Representative body Riverland Wines, they have been telling growers of Cab Sav and Shiraz to minimise their costs, otherwise they will be losing money once again. There is about 20,000 hectares of vineyards in the area. About 700 hectares are already being grafted into different varieties. Some growers are changing. They're either swapping into or expanding their citrus or almond crops. Local MP Tim Whetstone, he said that governments do need to put more emphasis on establishing trade relationships with new and existing trading partners. Primary Industries Minister Claire Scriven says the state and federal governments are already working on diversifying other markets, including re-establishing their trading ties with China. She said there is no one silver bullet to fix this problem, but the governments are already working on, they've already started investing into the region, and the research into low alcohol or no alcohol wines is already helping with the problem.
If there's an oversupply of red wine, we can probably offer some assistance and some help. Please do give us a call. We'll send some your way. Well, right now, heavy snow falls in part of the southeast in the weekend. Parisa Valley, as you can see, so there's a heavy snowfall for the weekend.
It might not be as well known as COVID or the flu, but respiratory syncytial virus can pack a punch.
Kids are miserable, flat. The high fever is a good sign, and that moist cough. That's enough for the parents to know that they want their kid checked out, which is absolutely fine.
For most people, RSV presents similarly to the common cold, but for young children and the elderly, the consequences can be more severe, potentially leading to pneumonia or bronchiolitis. And up to 3% of little ones become so sick they need to be hospitalised.
That doesn't sound much, but it is a lot when you look at all the hundreds of thousands of kids we've got. Just a few hundred ending up in hospital, that puts a big strain.
Data shows that the infection numbers across the country have grown rapidly. In Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia, the Northern Territory, WA and the ACT, the number of reported cases this year is much higher than the same time last year. New South Wales has only just begun tracking the data, but has already seen nearly 30,000 cases this year, while in Queensland it's more than 17,000. But because testing and tracking the virus has stepped up significantly, it's not clear how concerning the current situation is.
We haven't been tracking RSV numbers for very long. It only became notifiable in 2021. So we don't have that long record of what is usual.
Epidemiologists are closely watching vaccines that are emerging in the US and hope they'll help to keep the virus in check once they eventually hit Australian shores.
And it's actually given to pregnant women, and it protects infants up to a year. It's not authorised in Australia yet, but it should be, so perhaps in the next 12 months we'll see that available.
In the meantime, experts have familiar advice to slow the spread of RSV, urging people to stay home if they're sick and keep up their personal hygiene. Imogen Hain.
And there you go. Those two always go hand in hand. If you are sick, stay at home and always keep up the personal hygiene. If anything that we have learned through the COVID period is those two things. And if we could stick to those, there will be a lot more spread around the world. Right now to our next news. As we know, there's lots of talks about The Voice. Right, Nine apologizes for anti-Voice to Parliament ad.
The public debate over The Voice getting personal. This full-page advertisement in the Australian Financial Review, authorised by No Campaign Group Advance Australia, depicts Wesfarmers chairman Michael Chaney with his daughter, Independent MP Kate Chaney, sitting on his lap. Mr Chaney is offering a stack of cash to Yes23 director Thomas Mayo, pointing to Wesfarmers' $2 million donation to the Yes campaign. In a statement, Ms Chaney slammed the depiction, saying that
it's disappointing to see the No campaign stooping to personal and racist attacks.
It's a straightforward cartoon which is spelling out exactly what it is, which is about corporate Australia spending shareholders' money on this campaign.
But the depiction of Thomas Mayo has outraged supporters of The Voice.
It is offensive, it's inappropriate.
That kind of racist trope does not belong in Australian politics.
No campaigners aren't having it. In a statement, Advance Australia accused the Yes campaign of
playing the race card straight off the top of the deck.
I don't see any racism about that. And of course, there's no sexism whatsoever in it.
And in response to whether the debate has got out of hand and the attacks are getting too personal, Mr Mundine pointed his finger of blame directly at the Prime Minister.
We have not started this battle, he has.
But at his press conference, Anthony Albanese refused to be drawn in.
We'll continue to be positive, and this is a positive initiative.
This afternoon, the paper's publisher, Nine, apologised, saying the ad should not have been allowed to run in the first place. In a statement, a spokesperson said it wants to avoid personal or inappropriate attacks in the debate. Thomas Mayo and Wesfarmers decided not to respond to the ad. Isaac Naruzi, ABC News.
Well. I mean, if someone's booked in a space for an ad, that person would or should be liable for that, not the publishers. That's our stance. If some, an ad appears in the paper, and if the advertisers do not deliver the goods that they have promised, it is not an onus on the newspaper, which has just provided the platform for that company to provide. Same as in here, if that party had, so it should not be the newspaper apologizing. People who put the ad in should be apologizing if apologize is in the order. Well, right now, parents are urged to vaccinate children during school holidays. A very sound advice.
There were nearly 7,000 flu cases in the last reporting period. That's a more than 30% increase on the week before and an uptick for every age group. Health experts are most worried about school-aged children, who made up about half of all emergency department presentations for flu-like illnesses. That's because the type of flu circulating most right now, influenza B, tends to be more severe in young people. Since May, 16 children have been admitted to intensive care, some needing heart-lung bypass machines.
It really is palpable, the concern the clinicians have had. That's what really motivated us to come out today, is the fact that the clinicians have really seen this rise in cases. They've been particularly distressed because they've been previously healthy children.
In New South Wales, 5 to 16-year-olds don't qualify for free flu jabs, and most haven't had one. Families are being advised to get up to date on vaccinations before the school holidays come to an end.
And of course, that is a very, very sound advice that, get the vaccination done ASAP and stop the spread. Okay, right now we look at the Sydney trains and the investigations how one sick call brought the whole network to a standstill.
Sydney Trains says it will conduct a review after a large part of the network came to a standstill because one staff member called in sick. Reporter Ariana Levy joins us now from Sydney. Ari, good morning. So take us through exactly what happened yesterday.
Good morning, Michael. Well, this is sadly a story that we know all too well here in Sydney. Yesterday afternoon, just after 2:30 p.m, there were major delays across the Sydney Trains network as a result of two lines that were cancelled. Now, those lines were the T1 Western and T5 Cumberland line trains, and commuters yet again were left stranded on platforms in the midst of peak hour for over 90 minutes until services finally resumed. But by the time they resumed, there were the ongoing knock-off effects of those delays that continued well into the evening. Now, they were delays that meant across four lines of the system as well. At one point during the night, the T1 Sydney Trains official Twitter page just tweeted that the Western Line trains weren't running between Parramatta, St Mary's, Blacktown and Richmond. It said buses and replacement buses were being organised, but at that point in time, there were none that were available. As a result, Transport New South Wales also released a statement saying that they yesterday had late notice of a cancellation of a person calling in sick. Now, that person that called in sick had held a specialised role in the network, meaning that he was someone that impacted heavily the operations of the Sydney train network. And the ABC has since confirmed that person was in fact a train signaller, so someone that's in charge of ensuring that the train lines run smoothly and that the trains don't essentially crash into each other. Now, as you mentioned, Michael, Sydney Transport New South Wales says that they will be conducting a review into the matter, but it does beg major questions as to how important roles like this are that can bring an entire network yet again to a standstill.
Ari, thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Once again, as you can see, that one person taking a sickie can bring the whole network to a standstill. Well, right now, let's see what Tony Abbott has to say on the voice referendum.
Tony Abbott, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks, Sarah.
You wrote last year, done badly, recognition would entrench race-based separatism. What evidence do you have for that?
Well, I'm a supporter of recognition, but this isn't recognition. This is about power. And my problem with the voice, as it currently stands and as it will be put to the people, is that, first of all, it entrenches race in our Constitution.
Race, which is already in our Constitution.
Second, it reinforces the separatism, which I think is at the heart of Indigenous disadvantage. And third, it gums up our system of government even more.
Now, I just want to stay with the idea of separatism, because you've often joined the idea of gumming up in government. But on separatism, how can an advisory body like The Voice, which has no power itself to create legislation, raise that apartheid-style separatism that you're describing there?
Well, Sarah, this isn't just any old advisory body. It will be a body sanctified in the Constitution, with a constitutionally guaranteed right to make representations on anything effectively to everyone. And if the government or the agency to which the representations are made does not respond effectively, it could all quite easily end up in the High Court. And this is why, in perhaps an unguarded moment, Prime Minister Albanese said that it would be a very brave government that ignored The Voice. And this is why I think a lot of people think that this will be a quasi-veto in practice, if not in strict theory.
All right, that's a lot of things you said. Let's just go to one of those things, which was what the Prime Minister said. In that instance that you're referring to, it was a question specifically about lifting or maintaining grog restrictions in the Northern Territory, something which you would expect the Indigenous Voice to have strong knowledge and views on. So it wasn't a broad point that the Prime Minister was making. Just on the veto, clearly, the wording of The Voice says that it may make representations. And as we understand, it's up to Parliament to decide exactly how it's going to operate. There are plenty of senior legal minds who question that statement about a veto. Aren't you overstating the power of something that may make representations?
Well, I think we should always be very cautious about constitutional change. And in the end, it doesn't matter what the legislation says, because you can't out-legislate the Constitution.
But the Constitution
itself trumps
says,
legislation.
Indeed, the Constitution will say may make representation, not that the Parliament is obliged to follow that representation.
I'm not.
And correct, and what a debate. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go and take a look at some of the functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. There's lots of functions and events taking place right here in Brisbane. And we'll be back with you on Monday. And don't forget that tomorrow we'll have the doctor's program for this month, Aapki Sehat, meaning your health, coming tomorrow at 10 a.m. Well, until then, it's goodbye from us. As usual, it's been such a wonderful thing having your company today on this Friday as we head on to a wonderful weekend.